The first Republican candidate has declared for New Mexico's governor's race. APS is in the final stages of approving a record-setting budget. The first measles case in Doña Ana County has been confirmed. And the Office of Child Advocate within the New Mexico Department of Justice is moving forward, despite the governor's vetoes. From the Albuquerque Journal, this is the leading news. I'm Gino Gutierrez. It's Wednesday, April 16th, and I'll have more on those stories in a few moments, plus a look at Albuquerque's weather forecast on the other side of this break.
This episode is brought to you by the Kirtland Partnership Committee. For 30 years, we've been dedicated to supporting, growing, and preserving the Kirtland National Security Complex. We work tirelessly to enhance military readiness, foster community partnerships, improve quality of life, and promote economic development right here in New Mexico. Join us in our mission to ensure that Kirtland remains a cornerstone of national security and a key provider of quality jobs and investment for all of Greater Albuquerque. Together, we can make a powerful impact. Kirtland Partnership Committee, proudly shaping the future of our national security for 30 years.
The first Republican candidate to enter the governor's race here in New Mexico has officially been announced. With more on this, I'm now joined by the Journal's Capitol Bureau Chief, Dan Boyd. Dan, thank you so much for joining me. This Republican candidate, we had heard rumblings that they may be entering the race, but they did so in a very unusual way. What's the latest you can share with us?
Yeah, so the latest, Rio Rancho Mayor Greg Hull, we've, as you mentioned, heard rumblings about him. He's acknowledged that he's been kind of considering the race, but today, this morning, his campaign kind of put out a statement. He also has a campaign website as a statement kind of touting how much money he's raised. This is kind of in the context of mandatory campaign finance reports being filed on yesterday with the Secretary of State's office. So he said in the release, that, looking forward to making this big announcement in June, but also made it clear that, confirmed that he's running for governors, but, still not doing a kind of an official press conference or anything like that. So kind of an interesting way to roll this out to confirm his campaign, but, not really go public with it at this point.
So an interesting way to enter the campaign, no doubt, Dan, but he enters a race that's very hotly contested and already has two big-name Democratic candidates in it with Deb Haaland and Sam Bregman.
Yeah, and we've talked on past episodes about on the Democratic side with Deb Haaland and Sam Bregman, a few pretty well-known names, and already we've seen Deb Haaland, reporting almost $3 million in campaign contributions. So certainly getting a lot of attention on the Democratic side. On the Republican side, there hadn't been as much action. As you mentioned, Greg Hull is the first Republican in the race. That said, I'm expecting likely other Republicans will join in as well, but kind of waiting to see how that field develops, where we've already seen kind of two heavyweights on the Democratic side.
And something that was really unique that your story pointed out, Dan, is that Hull is Rio Rancho's longest serving mayor, but he's never run for a statewide office. So he's a name that I'm sure a lot of our listeners from around the state might not be too familiar with.
Yeah, and I think, frankly, that'll be his challenge kind of going forward. I mean, obviously, he is the longest serving mayor in Rio Rancho history, but to get to, voters in Albuquerque, Santa Fe, Las Cruces, who may not know much about him. And, that'll be kind of his challenge in the next year to kind of introduce himself to those voters and try to build up that name recognition, especially, with the fact that whoever wins the Republican primary next year will have to go up against one of these pretty well-known and well-funded Democratic candidates in the general election.
And Dan, as Hull enters the fray, it did not take very long for him to get some pushback and criticism on his announcement, particularly from the Democratic Governors Association, who criticized his record and things going on in Rio Rancho currently.
Yeah, they pointed out already. I mean, it seemed like they were kind of ready for this announcement. They cited, among other things, kind of the recent homicide rate in Rio Rancho, and they kind of said that, kind of making it clear that any Republican candidate in this race is going to get some pushback. I mean, this is a state that has seen Republican governors in the past, most recently, Susana Martinez, who served for 8 years, ending in 2018. But in recent years, it's a state that's increasingly kind of trended Democrat. It's been hard for Republicans to win statewide office. And I think that's going to be a challenge going forward. I mean, we haven't had almost a decade now since a Republican has won in a statewide race. And, clearly, I think, the challenge will be to build up that name recognition, raise enough money to run a competitive race, and then try to make the case for why you're the best candidate for the job. And I think for Greg Hull, who's has some executive experience, but as a mayor, that's going to be a new challenge, kind of trying to prove that he can do that on a statewide level.
So Rio Rancho Mayor Greg Hull, the first Republican to declare for New Mexico's governor race, and we are just a little over a year out from the general election, so sure to see more candidates join as we get closer to November of next year. Journal Capitol Bureau Chief Dan Boyd with the latest. Thanks, Dan.
Hey, thanks. Appreciate it.
Albuquerque Public Schools is preparing to approve its largest ever budget, estimated at $2.3 billion, despite a sharp drop in student enrollment.
APS enrollment numbers that are publicly available show that the district's lost over 20,000 students over the past decade, and half of that came since the COVID pandemic.
My colleague Noah Kalabach covers education for the Journal.
Now, that's not out of line with national trends. I mean, enrollment in U.S. public schools has declined since the pandemic, and it really hasn't returned to the levels that we saw before 2020.
APS faces a $4.7 million deficit, but increased state funding per student and targeted support programs have helped keep the district close to balanced. The state's public education department is raising the per student funding amount, known as quote unit value, by about $250, from $6,553.75 to $6,801.35. The state equalization guarantee will contribute nearly $1 billion to APS's budget, while federal grants will make up another $345 million. Operating costs remain high due to state-mandated employee raises, rising expenses across the board, and the commitment to provide base resources to every school, regardless of size. All New Mexico public school employees are set to receive a 4% raise this summer, adding to the financial pressure. Education advocates like Amanda Aragon from New Mexico Kids Can question the logic of increasing budgets when districts like APS are serving significantly fewer students. She argues there's been little financial consequence for declining enrollment. Another layer of uncertainty comes from the possible federal funding cuts, especially following proposals to dismantle the Department of Education under President Donald Trump. APS will present a final version of the budget to the school board on May 7th, with plans to submit it to the state by May 19th. Despite challenges, APS says its budget planning is, quote, grounded in reality and focused on sustaining quality education. In other headlines from the newsroom, New Mexico health officials have confirmed the first case of measles in Doña Ana County, bringing the total number of infections in the state to 63 across 4 counties: Chavez, Doña Ana, Eddy, and Lee. The latest case involves an unvaccinated child. 3 additional unvaccinated individuals in Lee County were also recently diagnosed. The outbreak is part of a larger regional surge, with West Texas reporting 561 cases since late February. That includes 2 fatalities and unvaccinated children. The majority of Texas's cases are in Gaines County, which borders New Mexico's Lee County. El Paso County, adjacent to Doña Ana, has also seen reported cases, which has prompted concern from health officials. Dr. Miranda Durham, Chief Medical Officer for the New Mexico Department of Health, emphasized the importance of vaccination, especially given measles' high contagious nature. Families are urged to ensure their vaccinations are current, particularly if they reside in or plan to travel to the affected areas. The outbreak has led to a significant increase in vaccinations across New Mexico, with over 18,000 doses administered from February to mid-April, nearly double the amount during the same period last year. Measles symptoms include cough, runny nose, red eyes, fever, and a spreading rash. Anyone experiencing symptoms or who may have been exposed should contact the NMDOH helpline at 833-796-8773. That's 833-796-8773. Walk-in vaccinations are available at 2 public health offices in Las Cruces. The Las Cruces Public Health Office at 1170 North Solano Drive is open on Mondays from 1 to 3 p.m. and Fridays from 9 to 11 a.m. And the Las Cruces East Mesa Public Health Office, located at 5220 Holman Road, is open on Wednesdays from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. and 1 o'clock to 3 p.m. And the newly created Office of Child Advocate, designed to provide external oversight of New Mexico's Children's, Youth, and Families Department, is set to begin operations this July, but with far less funding than originally planned. Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham recently used her line item veto power to cut $1 million in startup funding and a separate $650,000 appropriation from the state budget. However, she left a third similar $650,000 earmark intact, which supporters say will allow the office to begin its work. Despite concerns from child welfare advocates, Attorney General Raul Torres has pledged to fill the funding gap. His office has committed Department of Justice resources to help launch the new agency. Lauren Rodriguez, Torres' chief of staff, said, quote, "We will continue to advocate for children's civil rights with or without the governor's support." The creation of the Office of Child Advocate was authorized under House Bill 5, which passed with bipartisan support after years of advocacy. The office will review CYFD's handling of cases, investigate complaints related to children in state custody, and operate a public hotline for reporting issues. Though the governor ultimately sign the bill, she did so with criticism, accusing lawmakers and Torres of using the legislation for political gain rather than child protection. Lujan Grisham and CYFD Secretary Teresa Casados had previously resisted outside oversight, citing concerns over agency morale and internal cooperation. Supporters argue the office is essential given CYFD's long-standing issues, including persistent staffing shortages and a rising rate of repeat child abuse cases. The governor's spokesperson defended the vetoes, saying $650,000 is sufficient for the office to get started and that additional funding could be requested in the next budget cycle. A director for the office will be appointed by the governor from a list vetted by a selection committee. If you like hearing all of the latest news from the Albuquerque Journal here on the Leading News, consider becoming a digital subscriber to the Albuquerque Journal. You can check our show notes for a discount code on a digital subscription and keep up with all the latest news from New Mexico's leading news source. Now taking a look at Albuquerque's weather forecast. Today you can expect sunny skies with a high near 86, and this evening mostly clear with a low around 49. To keep up with all the latest news from the Albuquerque Journal, you can visit our website at abqjournal.com. That's the Leading News. I'm Gino Gutierrez. We'll be back tomorrow.